Back in 1972, we put up a billboard in Vancouver, Canada. It had a big word on it. It said ecology. Look it up. Nobody even knew what it meant. So we've come a long ways, but we still have a long ways to go. I've also found over the years, though, that one of the best defenses is humor. And so we construct defense systems to defend ourselves, trying to make them as humorous as possible. So our weapons include stink bombs and water cannons and balloon slingshots and water cannons that fire pie filling, and I can slime an opposition with 45 gallons of cream or chocolate pie, and it's effective, but it doesn't hurt them. And also, having a sense of humor has helped us in many other cases. Back in 1981, we wanted to get evidence on the illegal killing of whales in the Soviet Union. So in 1981, I landed on a beach in Siberia with my crew to document an illegal whaling operation. We were the first people to invade the Soviet Union since World War II. And so it was a pretty daunting experience, but we stepped out of the boat and there were 2 Soviet soldiers patrolling the beach. And we didn't know why they were there until later. We found out this was a big fur farm, fox, mink, and sable, and it was actually a capital offense to smuggle a sable out of the Soviet Union, so that's why the soldiers were guarding this facility. But as we walked around documenting, they didn't bother us. Why? They just assumed we had to be Russians. Who else would be landing on a Siberian beach with cameras? And so we went around for 45 minutes and documented everything, and then I went back to the boat, and I got back into the boat, and I was pushing it out, and one of the soldiers came up behind me, and he pointed at the boat, and he said, "Что это? What is that?" And I looked at it, and I said, it's a Zodiac. And he said, "No, it's a Mercury." And that's when I realized a Mercury outboard engine, yeah, we're in trouble. And because they didn't have those in the Soviet Union at the time. So I pushed the boat out, and I turned my back on him, and I said to the 2 men in the crew, I said, "What's he doing?" He says, "He's taking his gun down." I said, "Well, wave and smile at him, for God's sakes." So they started waving and smiling, and that so confused him that he turned and ran up the hill to get help, because it's pretty hard to shoot somebody when you're waving and smiling at them like you're a friend. And so we got back feeling pretty good about it, and then we headed out down the coast, and about a half hour later, 2 helicopter gunships came out of nowhere with the big red stars on the side of them, and started strafing across our deck, but not hitting us, but giving us warning shots. And then out of nowhere, this large Soviet frigate came alongside, and the captain came on board on the radio and says, "Sisha, stop your ship and prepare to be boarded by the Soviet Union." And I said, "Captain, we don't have room for the Soviet Union, we're not stopping." Nobody says no to these people. They don't know how to deal with no. And we've used that on the Portuguese, the Norwegians, and on the Spanish Navy. They don't know how to say no, and so what happens, that buys us the time to get away. So we're actually able to elude pursuit from the Soviet Navy, because meanwhile the captain's on the radio to Moscow saying, "What am I supposed to do? Who are these people? I don't know." And then by the time he found an answer, we were gone and got away with it. But sometimes you have to do things knowing that there's no way out. In 1979, I hunted down the pirate whaler Sierra. We crossed from Boston, found it 200 miles off the coast of Portugal, chased it into a Portuguese harbor. And I had a problem there. I couldn't hit them on the outside because of rough weather. So I went in and I said, "Look," to my crew, there's 20 of us on board. I said, "Look, I'm going to take the vessel out and we're going to ram that guy and disable him. And I can't say you're not going to get hurt, but I can guarantee one thing. We're all going to jail in Portugal for this. So I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. So if you don't want to do, pack your bags, and 10 minutes we're out of here and you're off the boat." 10 minutes later, 17 of them were on the dock with their things. Fortunately, the 2 that stayed with me were both engineers. So we were able to start up the engines, pull away, went across the harbor. I struck him at 15 knots across the bow to damage his harpoon, did a 360-degree turn, came in and hit him midships and split him open to the waterline at full speed. Totally disabled, ended his career. We were then taken into custody by the Portuguese Navy, and I was brought before the port captain, who charged me with gross criminal negligence, until I said, "Captain, there wasn't anything negligent about what I did. We hit him exactly where we intended to hit him." And he said, "Well, yeah, well, that may be true, but the problem is I can't find out who owns this boat." And nobody admitted to owning it because it was a pirate whaler, so he said, "You're free to go." When I walked out, one of the crew of the 17 who got off, he said to me, "Well, I would have been there too if I knew you were going to get away with it." Sometimes you have to do these things knowing that there is no way that you're going to get away with it, but because the issue is bigger than you. And sometimes these sacrifices are worth making. I'm surprised I'm still alive. I'm 59 years old now, and I started doing this with Greenpeace when I was 18. I was the youngest founding member of Greenpeace. But the fact is that in all of our years of operation since 1977 with the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, we've never had anybody seriously injured. We've never injured anybody, and we've never been convicted of a felony, and we've never been sued, because we're an anti-poaching organization and we oppose outlaw criminal operations, even if those operations are supported by various governments. The reason being, we have all the rules and regulations that we need to protect our oceans. The problem is we don't have enforcement. Governments do not have the economic and political will to enforce the law. And that's why we have taken it upon ourselves to do this. And we act under the guidance of the United Nations World Charter for Nature, which allows for non-government organizations to uphold international conservation law. And so people challenge us all the time. And last year, actually last August, I gave a talk at the FBI Academy in Quantico. And one of the FBI agents said, well, you know, Sea Shepherd's walking a pretty damn fine line when it comes to the law. I said, so? Well, who cares how fine it is as long as you don't cross it? They had to agree on that. And so we're very consistent about that. We are enforcing the law. Right now we're working in full partnership with the Galapagos Park National Rangers and the Ecuadorian Federal Police to stop poaching in the Galapagos Island Marine Reserve. We've been doing that for 11 years. Our ship, the Steve Irwin, was just here in New York City, left last weekend from Pier 59. It's heading across the Atlantic, and I'll join it on the 14th in southern France, where we begin our campaign to protect bluefin tuna. And that's where I'd like to finish off, is to show you what we're up against. I call it the politics and the economics of extinction. That there's money to be made by driving a species into extinction. And the bluefin tuna is the best example of that. Mitsubishi in Japan has built giant warehouses to stuff as much bluefin tuna into it as they possibly can. This is a fish that sells on the market for anywhere between $75,000 and $200,000 per fish. There's a lot of money. When you have that kind of price tag on your head, you know, it's pretty hard to survive. But the more dead bluefin they stuff into those refrigerated warehouses, the less live bluefin tuna there is in the wild. And the less live ones increases the value of the dead ones in the warehouses. And if you wipe them out, as they're intent on doing, then you have a priceless commodity in your warehouse. And Mitsubishi is looking at a $1 million fish and billions of dollars worth of profit. So there's a deliberate policy to drive species into extinction, as we are doing with sharks, as we are doing with world fisheries. The United Nations says by 2048 there will be no fishing industry anywhere on this planet. Our problem is we have a lack of vision. We don't look forward to 2048. That's our children's problem, isn't it? And we forget the way things are being, and we forget that we adapt to diminishment. We're constantly adapting to diminishment. So in the hotel there's a bottle of water, $7. Half a liter of water for $7. You know, in 1965, if I had told you you'd be buying water in plastic bottles for more money than gasoline, you'd looked at me like I'm a raving lunatic, yet we've adapted to diminishment. The turbot, which is a fish they threw away 20 years ago, I saw in the fish market recently in Paris, 24 euros a kilo. We, again, adapting to diminishment. We'll get down to eating jellyfish salad before we finally figure out that we're pushing this too far. We share this planet with all of these other species, and we have to protect them, because if we don't, then our days are numbered. I look on the Earth as a spaceship. That's what it is. We're hurling through space, and the atmosphere, the biosphere, is our life support system. If I were to go into my engine room and I saw my engineers popping rivets out of the hull, and I said, what are you guys doing? Well, you know, we get $1 apiece for these when we get back to port. Oh, really? Oh, well, gee, count me in on that if I was near responsible captain, as are most irresponsible world leaders today. Count me in for part of the profit is pretty much the rule of thumb. But if I was a responsible captain, I would get them out of there, because they're going to pull one rivet too many and the hull's going to collapse and the ship is going to sink. Every species is a rivet in the hull of the biosphere. And we're going to pull one too many and the biosphere is going to collapse and we will have no life support system. And then when it happens, I can just see it now, everybody will be saying, how did that happen? Why didn't somebody tell us? You know, environmentalists and conservationists are always condemned for being doom and gloomers. Oh, you guys are all doom and gloom all the time and everything. Rush Limbaugh called us doom and gloom Cassandras. What that tells me is Rush never read the book, which is hardly surprising. But the Iliad, yes, Cassandra was all doom and gloom. But what people forget, she was right. And everything she predicted came true. But everything she had predicted, if her father had listened to her, Troy would not have fallen. So if conservationists and environmentalists today are the doom and gloom Cassandras, the leaders of this planet simply need to listen to what we're saying. And that will be a way of avoiding that doom and gloom, because I think that we can turn this around. I'm an optimist. I think we can turn it around, and we're going to turn it around by harnessing all of our skills and our abilities and our talents and our imagination and doing this together, because that strength of this movement lies in diversity, diversity of approaches from all different walks of life, from all different talents. And I think that we can do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you.